states which already have had those kind of permits. And rightly so, as they judge, you have a right to self-defense, and what you defend yourself with has to be pretty much equal to what they're coming at you with, okay? So that was a good decision, another one in the notch for the Supreme Court, and there's been a few along the way since Heller, which we'll talk about Heller shortly. Okay, go ahead. Now, if you read the wordage of the Second Amendment, the way it was written has led to a lot of different views, factually too, as you will see, concerning what does it really apply to human ability to defend themselves and to have guns, so to speak, or weapons of self-defense. And as it says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, to me, what that says is that we have to have a militia, or we can have a militia. We'll talk about how that got started. But we also have to say that because there's a comma there, and it's the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You will see shortly how that statement up there, the Second Amendment, has been interpreted over the years, how a good number of people still think of it another way. So we'll go on. Go ahead. There are two views: collective right only as a militia. And the second one pertains to the individual right to own firearms, the Heller decision, D.C. versus Heller in 2008. We'll get into that in a minute. Now, you see the two views are up there. And you are currently hearing the one view, the one that's number one, quite a lot, okay? You hear that more than anything on the news. We've had a tremendous crime spree in this country for some time. In the blue areas, thank God the red areas are pretty well protected, and they carry on the law. But in our situation right now, there are a lot of individuals that are saying the one is the militia and we should not have guns, as you will see. Go ahead. There are originally in this country two parties. You know, when they developed the Constitution, the writers, Jefferson and the others, and the guys approved it, all felt that we do not need to have political parties. Now, you want me up there, right? Oh, I kept forgetting that. I told you I'm always around. They want me up here. They're photographing this thing. Okay, so basically, when they started this thing, they didn't want to have parties. There's nothing in the Constitution about political parties. That's up to the states, and that's where it belongs. But in essence, they felt the party orientation would end up you're serving your party and not the people. Okay, so now think about that. You're serving your party, but not your people. Do we see that today? Our side's pretty good about helping the people. We still have interest in that. But the other side, not so much, okay? And we understand that. Okay, so now we have the Federalists. Actually, Hamilton developed this program, this party, in 1789. It lasted until 1816. And as you can see up there, it's made up of the wealthy, the well-educated, the elites. The uneducated and poor were incapable of governing, they felt, that they had the better ideas, okay? And basically, best to be governed by a large central government. Well, that's an autocracy, okay? And are those, and many of those in our country, who think autocracies will work better. And they point to China. And you see, human beings are human beings. And if given the handle to take the wealth, they will. And this is what happens when you have an autocracy. They gear everything to their wealth gain, and the people become slaves with no freedom. Understand? So, here we have a situation where the Federalists in their time were like the current group that liked autocracy, that the other people were below them and did not have the right to make decisions. But I will tell you right now, if you wish, maybe some of you have, I have, economics is a favorite hobby of mine. It's worth a lot to me because that's how I retired at a good age and live well. And the point is you have to understand economics. And what we have right now is a failure of economics in the Chinese company. The party has failed, totally failed. But yet it's an autocracy. It's supposed to be perfect. It's collapsing, okay? So just take my word for it if you study their real history and their currency of evaluation of things. The next party was the anti-federalist party, the Libertarians, Jefferson. He was a person who actually made up of wealthy landowners who actually were the ones who developed this party. These were your farmers, and your slaveholders and your plantation owners. Okay? But they also wanted to join with the poor and the uneducated and supported limited government and individual rights. And you've heard this phrase, the best governed is the least governed, from Jefferson. And I think we all agree with that. So you see, the farmers to the land in those days worked hard. And they just didn't want to hand everything over to a central government, which would give it to other people. They wanted to keep it for themselves. So they wanted limited government. But again, you must understand, and we do know this, whether it's probably not taught in schools anymore to any great degree. We know that slavery was a way of economics in those days for everybody in every country. It was England first that started to abolish it. But in essence, you have to understand that where we were then, we're not there now, and we haven't been for a long time. This country's come a long way. I don't have the time to share my personal experiences with the Jim Crow laws and everything else. And my experiences in the ghetto, working in the ghetto as a student physician. But it's an interesting time I've had, and I understand things very well. And so basically, the libertarians, they're also known as the Republicans, the Democrats were also attributed to them. The liberals like to say they're the party of Jefferson because of the word libertarian. That's not what it means. Libertarian is just the opposite of liberal, okay? But I just wanted to set that straight. So now you have these two parties, and it's important understanding they were started there right along the time we had done the Bill of Rights. Then we had all these discussions following about the Bill of Rights, and especially the Second Amendment and others. Go ahead. All right. Now, the state versus the individual right. Where did that all come from? Well, if you want to, I have the book, but the Federalist book, but if you want to have some fun, just go online to Google. Oh, there I go again. And basically, what you want to do there is Google Second Amendment. And you're going to see all kinds of things there. Okay, I'll discuss that in a moment. But also Google number 29, the Federalist paper, was Jefferson, and I'll mention that in a minute. Where he discusses at length why we should have militias. They should be under state control, paid for by states. He was not impressed by a central large national army because he thought that would be toward dictatorship. So that was why it all got started about the militias. And we had militias even before he did his number 29 Federalist paper, and others joined him with this. But again, nowhere will you find in that paper or others that have written about the militias back in those days that you could only have a gun if you did not have, if you were not a member. If you were a member of the militia, you could have a gun. But after that, if you weren't, you were not allowed to have a gun. That's what they'll preach today when you go online. You're going to see that. We know it's not true. Okay, we know it's not true. The gun was essential to life. That's where your meat came from in a lot of cases. And the militia in those days was 15 to 45. So what about everybody over 45? They didn't need a gun? Sure, they needed a gun. Because, you know, back in those times, they wrote the Second Amendment to protect us so the government can't take our God-given right. But they never considered about the gun thing because they got their guns and it was given to them by God. And if you go back to April the 19th, 1775, you will find on the Lexington and Concord situation, that's where it all started. It's most interesting to me when you study the history that back before that date, for 10 years, we were fighting the British over all these aggressive moves against us, higher taxes. Remember, we had the Tea Party, the Boston Massacre. We had a lot of bad things, but they still stayed in the colonies as colonies of Britain, and not real things were really getting started yet. Then somebody came from Boston who lived in Concord and happened to mention to everybody, it was around April the 15th or 14th, 5 or 6 days before the British came and the two battles occurred. And they said, guess what, guys? They're coming in from Boston to get our guns. Well, that did it. I mean, the tax thing is one thing, but the guns? So what they did was they ran around, they dug a couple big pits and put some old cannons and guns in there and covered them up. Then they hid all their guns in good places where the British couldn't find them. So when the British came, we want your guns and all, you know, well, we don't have many left. We don't use them anymore. We buried them. We have a couple over here if you want to see them. So they gave them something to look at, all right? So what happened was it got aggressive because they started getting fresh with the people. They started moving around, doing things they shouldn't have been doing. And then we had the great was shot and heard around the world, and Lexington there, and the Concord and Lexington situation started. The British lost big time that day because of soldiers are sitting up, the officers on their horses with brass things on their neck and everything, and they just picked them off from up high on the mountain there, and they started dropping like flies, and they fled. They fled all the way back to Boston, but they were hit hard all the way back, okay, by our Confederates. So basically, that was where the whole thing got started about the gun issue. Now, remember, our forefathers were very smart people, and they studied governments from history, back to Charlemagne and all these other places, Greek, Roman, the Magna Carta, okay? And they put all their knowledge together in this wonderful short document, the Constitution, that's held our country together all these years, backed up by the Second Amendment. Now, on the first one, militia, Hamilton in the Federalist Papers, number 29, concerning the militia, Daily Advisor, January the 10th, 1788. This is where he published this in 1788. Supported state militias instead of a national army. And he goes on about a lot of things, but if you go in there, nowhere does it say you couldn't have your guns. You can only have them as you're a militia. Now, a point about that, when you go online, you're going to see a lot of things about this and how to interpret this amendment. And you'll read some things like during that time, when they wrote the Constitution, they only recognized white men. All people meant white men. Women couldn't vote. Blacks couldn't vote. Non-whites couldn't vote, okay, because the white man was in power. They will go on in some instances say the purpose of the Second Amendment was to keep blacks from having guns. Well, in those days, the blacks were slaves. You're not going to give slaves guns. So everything they're saying pertaining to what they find fault with at the time was the way business was done around the world. No one thought of anything else. But I will tell you, if you read some of the writings of Jefferson, he had scruples about slavery. He finally gave up his slaves. He didn't like it. He didn't want it, okay? So he was one of the individuals back then who kind of canceled it out in his way. But again, they have all kinds of derogatory things to say about this amendment, and pay attention to what they're saying, because a lot of those people now are fostering those in power. So anyway, let's look at the other part. The individual right, Washington, D.C. versus Heller. There was a specialty officer, I forget exactly what he did in Washington, D.C. back in 2006 or so, who actually applied for a registration for a handgun in Washington, D.C. Well, you were not allowed to have a handgun. So in certain circumstances, because it was a May issue, they would give you a registration to go buy a gun, an ID card or whatever, but they very seldom would allow that. So he applied. He was a special police officer and all, and he thought he would get it, and he was denied. All he wanted was a home gun to protect his home, and they wouldn't give it to him. So he went through the first appeals court. He lost. He went to the second one. He won. And then it finally got up to the Supreme Court at that time. 5-4 decision in the Heller case. And this is what they said. And Scalia wrote the decision. The Second Amendment protects an individual right to possess a firearm unconnected with service in a militia, and to use that arm for traditionally lawful purposes such as self-defense within the home. Now, in that whole dissertation that he went through, if you read it, the one thing that he doesn't kind of address is what guns can they outlaw or anything like that. He felt that was not present, should not be present in this decision. This is a federal decision on the Second Amendment. What guns people can own or can't have is up to their locales, their states, not the federal government, okay? That's why you hear now ban the assault weapon. I can tell you on my range, we see so many people with these guns. Every other person has many of them. And they're very careful, law-abiding citizens practicing, okay? So now we know that they want to take assault weapons. Well, there's no such thing as an assault weapon unless it's used in an assault. A golf club is an assault weapon. Baseball bat is an assault weapon once it's used in assault. These are just semi-automatic rifles. And the farce is when they passed the ban back in the Clinton era, 94, they passed that 10-year ban on AR-15s. They still mailed all the AR-15s they could. They just took the grip off. They took the flash hider off, the bayonet lug, and some other few things on it to take the dressing down so it didn't look like a military weapon, okay? And that was basically it. It was the same gun produced, and it shot the same ammo and the same rate of fire and the same magazines and stuff, except they went to 10. It's silly. It's just silliness, okay? But again, its purpose is not what they're saying it's for, okay? That's why we have the Second Amendment. You give up your guns, you're going to have tyranny. Like in all the other countries now, they're having problems. Look at Canada. Perfect example. Our brothers. So, I am not turning this into a political discussion. I am telling you the reason why we have the Second Amendment. And I'll remind you, as I started, I think it's so good in these times that they gave us that. Okay? So, that was the decision on Heller. Go ahead. In reality, the Bill of Rights was created to enumerate the basic God-given unalienable rights, the 10 of them, of which the second backs them up. It is the main one. The amendments were written to prevent the government from taking them away, not written to give you the right. You already have it. Purpose of the Second Amendment to prevent tyranny, and that was their purpose. They had come through all this. They'd seen what happened in England and the tyranny in our country and other places, and they just gave it up. So, am I okay here? You see me? Yeah. I try to keep an eye there. I see my picture. Yeah, we're doing okay. So, the point I want to make is that in this situation right now, it's not a bad idea that we are armed, okay? I'm not advocating civil war. Others are. The other day on the Kudlow show, I like to watch him. He's a good economist. He had Lafler, he had Moore, and he had Forbes on. And he said, you know, gentlemen, after discuss the downfall of our economy has been destroyed, you know, he said, I don't see anything beyond the one thing. He says, we're going to have separation. And the three of them agreed. We will have to have separation because no one can continue with the way things are. And the real story will be in the midterm. If we lose the midterm and they win again, are we going to overlook the last election like we did? We're going to do that. That's up to us, okay? Because when a republic loses its right to vote, you've lost your republic. Okay, so go ahead. Thomas Jefferson wrote, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We all know that phrase. I just wanted to put it up there, the word unalienable. They're from God. And you know that's a good thing because we're the only government that's ever done that. Just flip the next one. What is tyranny? When your rights come from government and not God. That's when you know you will have tyranny. Every country goes that way. I'll share something on the side just so you understand. Back in 1995, when Obama was running for Senate in the Chicago area, he was on a talk show, an interview by a radio host show. And the question came up about the Constitution. And the question was, well, I understand you teach in Chicago at the college there constitutional law. Yes, I do. And he said the Constitution was never written correctly. He said what it says is it prevents the government from taking away certain rights. He said that's wrong. He said that shouldn't be. He said it should be. The rights, the Bill of Rights should be obliterated. And it should be replaced with the rights that the government thinks you should have. And he said that. And he believes that. Okay? He really strongly believes that. So does Biden and the others. Like I say, I'm giving you reality. I'm not talking politics now. I don't like to get into all that. I'm just telling you what we have. All right? And you're a fool if you believe otherwise. A simple fool. Okay? So basically, why is everybody trying to get in here? Right? Why do we have up to 20,000 a day now coming across our country, you know, coming into our country? Why is that if we're so bad? Right? We keep asking that question, but where they are speaks for itself. Now, do you have any questions on what I covered? I have my good friend Randy Neal here, who's also our prosecutor in the county. If you have any really intense legal questions, I'm not a lawyer. I was a physician in my previous life, so I may not be able to. I know he can. He's great on it. Any questions at all about the Second Amendment? I was. Yes. You know, I could share a side story with you, which you'll find interesting, about Always There, okay? My grandfather came from Marburg, Germany, okay, on the Lahn River. It's about 20 minutes outside of Frankfurt. And if you study the various doctrines by the Marxist groups, the Marx himself and others, and you read into all this, it all came from Frankfurt University. That's where the term Bolshevism came from. And so my grandfather was well aware of that. And I remember over a number of years back in the 40s and 50s, we'd be over there for dinner on a Sunday night. And after we'd sit down, and my dad and I, my granddad would sit there. And for the rest of the evening, all he talked about was the Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks. He went on and on. And I have a reason for that. When he was in Germany, even in the 90s, he left around 95 and came to America. But even then, they had tumult. Okay, and they never did have a conservative party until after Hitler was gone. But they did, because Hitler was not conservative. He was totalitarian, just like the communists. But now we face our issues differently today. I hope and pray that the concept of our folks will maintain itself and we don't weaken. Because if we do, then we've given everything up. We have a beautiful country with beautiful people. You know, all of them, all colors, all races. That's why we're so popular in the world. Let's keep it as a safe, justice, patriotic country that helps everyone. That's what we need. Good. All right. No questions? All right, I guess I'm off the hook on that one. Okay, we're on then. Oh, sure. What that means is very simple, and you'll be surprised. You do have a right to own anything the government owns. You can go out and buy a tank. You can go buy out any machine gun you want. You want a full auto whatever, you can get it. You can buy them order. You know, if you get the permission, there's registration requirements. You are allowed to. They won't tell you that. Now, just on the machine gun thing, automatic weapons. I was a dealer, I was a pathologist and nuclear medicine specialist in Florida, but I had a good friend, and we developed a little business on the side. And yeah, I told you about. I walk when I talk. So yeah, so I learned that business well, and this was back in the '80s, later '80s, early '90s. And you could buy a machine gun all day of different types, like a Thompson, for about $1,500, and sell it for $2,000. You get it about $1,500 as a dealer. So I really hadn't paid much attention to all this when I had left Arizona. My wife and I moved here. We actually moved to Jackson before. When I got there, I sold the rest of my machine gun collection, 21 pieces, to ski over there at the arms there. And basically, I had no use for them anymore. So today, I've not really kept up with it, but out of our range, we had this independent company come out and do some specialty lessons for some people. And one day they had a fellow there, a young fellow from the middle of the state here. He had a whole collection of machine guns. He had an HK5 sitting there, and with a suppressor on it. I should say HK9. And I said, just for the heck of it, what's that gun selling for now? But I said to him I could pick them up and sell them without suppressors for about $1,500, with a suppressor about $2,000 back in late '80s, early '90s. He said that gun right now is on the market for $76,000. Okay, now I could buy Thompsons for $1,500 all day and sell them for $2,000. Recently, a friend of ours bought a Thompson, and he paid $40,000 for it. So you see, what's happened is this. Owning a machine gun now is only for the very wealthy. It used to be for everybody. But the federal government changed the law. They can no longer be manufactured. No one can import any. So there's no new supply. So what's out there is all you got. What happens when that's all you got? Price goes up. But you can still buy one if you want to pay for it. Yes, you can own anything. People own tanks, you know. The thing is that who would be much interested? You know, we're not interested in that. We just want to have what the other guy's got that's coming at us, okay? And that's the thing we have to be aware of. If you give up all your semi-automatic weapons and all you got is a single-shot gun, you're toast. They'll come into your neighborhood and take everything you got and kill you, okay? But self-defense is my other business, and we're going to talk about that next, plus other things. Okay, any questions? A good question. Yeah. Yep. Correct. That's correct. Never. Yes. Yes, he brings up a very good point. You know, the guns are regulated. You can't walk into a store and buy a gun without filling out a 4473 form, right? That's the background check, right? So you see, that's okay. We're not arguing with that. But the background check, as we know, doesn't work. It hasn't worked for a long time. Because you see, the background check is like any computer program, garbage in, garbage out. Okay? And that's what we have now. So we see that all the mass shootings is the same. Well, he was as crazy as not, but he went in the store and bought the guns legally. I mean, that's just the old stuff. So that's where we are there. Something has to be done, but taking away the guns isn't going to be it. Good questions. Anything else? Yeah. Well, yeah, I've not heard that, but I can see. I'm uncomfortable it's electronically done now because you know under the law, when you close your business as a gun dealer, those forms you have to turn them into the government. But they have to destroy them within a very short period of time. But what about if it's electronic? Yeah, that's exactly right. You'll never find them again, but they got them. You know, right? So that's another thing. But again, uh, we're very fortunate in our country that we got the Second Amendment. It has given us a lot of freedoms. I just think that in the end result, we'll prevail in this. We always have. It may not be pleasant. I don't know. I hope it is pleasant. I hope we don't have a civil war. I don't want that. Nobody does. But again, there's contention now. And the idea of carrying a gun for self defense is not a bad idea today, even in Idaho Falls. If you have a carry permit, you don't have to go through the background check. You just give them your carry permit and you pick up your gun. Saves that aggravation. Yes. Yes. That was a prerequisite in their verbal studies that you do. Read what they say. Yeah. Yeah, and you know, a lot of states do have that. Okay, and it's kind of required in many of them, and they can call them up to a standing militia if necessary. Um, I can only say that in the long run, no one knows what the future is in our country, but we do have to look at the statistics right now. And there are about 600,000 police officers in the country. There's about 3 or 4 million of the cartels, and they're heavily armed. We have Antifa, we have BLM, we have the Black Panthers, the Black Militia. They have 200 training camps around the country, and they're actively training. If I went with Doug and all my friends in this room that I know, and I took them out there and I said, hey, we're going to start a military camp over here in the park of the city. We're going to start military training. How long do you think we'd get away with that? Right? Okay. But keep that in mind, what I just told you. They're very active. So we'll just have to see. Now, good questions before we go on. Anything else? Good. All right. Next slide. Now, in firearms training, we see people out that come out to the range and they shoot, okay, and they don't shoot well, and we don't really want to interfere unless they want us to help them. And they've been shooting a lot, You see, with shooting, we always say perfect practice, perfect practice, perfect practice. You can practice all day, but if you're not holding the gun right, you're not shooting the fundamentals correctly, you're not controlling the recoil, you're never going to shoot well. You're not going to hit what you're trying to hit. Okay? So that's what this is all about, isn't it? Training is about a couple things, all right? First of all, safety, handgun safety. You'd be surprised the number of people that really don't understand what comes out the front can kill you. Okay? If you go to some unsupervised ranges and you watch what people are doing, one guy is loading his gun at the table, that guy walks up in front of his muzzle to change his target 50 yards down the road. Nobody's paying attention to the muzzle or what everybody's doing. That's not good, all right? That's dangerous. So we'll cover safety. Marksmanship is fundamentals of shooting. Basically, it's recoil management. If you have good recoil management methods, you'll become a good shooter. We have shooting sports and hunting. We'll cover that. And, of course, then we have self-defense. Most of our training business now is self-defense. Our school is certified to teach all NRA subjects, basic and advanced. We schedule certain NRA classes through the year. Women on Target, a lot of ladies like that, so we sponsor that. Mary Nett is one of our instructors for that. She kind of guides it. Yes. And we also have the handgun instructor and classes for NRA instructors, rifle, personal protection at home. We put that up, and shotgun, too, if they want. But our self-defense classes are basically non-NRA. We incorporate some of the NRA teachings, but they don't get into that much. So our training there is from other places that we've trained and things that I have brought into the program from my years of experience, okay? So that's what self-defense is all about. Training for self-defense is not complicated, but it is intricate, as you will see. Now we have up there the 3 basic rules of the NRA. And I will have you read them with me, okay? This is what we do in our class. Number 1, let's go. Always keep the gun pointed in a safe direction. Number 2, always keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. And number 3, always keep the gun unloaded until you're ready to use it. If you follow those 3 rules, you will never have an accident with your gun. Number 1 is the golden rule, okay? Let's define these now. The first one says keep the gun pointed in a safe direction. Well, in this room right now, if I had a gun, where would the safe direction be? Well, I'm looking around here. I got doors there, so there's hallways out there. I have doors there that are open, doors all around, except for here and not there, but back there, okay? Also, keep in mind, though, whatever I'm shooting, it's going to go through these walls, okay? So I don't have a safe place to direct my gun in this place unless you want to point it at the floor, So, again, it depends on your environment. But we like to say that, obviously, you're going to shoot on a range or some controlled area where the bullet coming out is going to be safe. We do advocate in our classes, as you will see, dry fire practice with dummy cartridges, and we do have a safety lesson about that. So when you shoot these things, or fumble with these things, you're not shooting them, in your home, you won't make any mistakes. For instance, don't point out the window with a gun. Your neighbor may be coming by, and as Randy will tell you, you can be charged with assault with a deadly weapon, attempted assault with a deadly weapon. But let's first keep the gun pointed in a safe direction. That means if it accidentally goes off, it won't kill any living thing. It won't blow up a propane tank, okay, or something like that. So if it hits something, it's inert. It's not going to do any harm. Always keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. That's the hardest one of all. This is something that you have to do for safety because safeties are mechanical devices that can break. So you want to be keeping your finger off the trigger when you're not pointing down range. If you're loading a semi-auto and you have your finger on the trigger, you probably will get a slam fire when the slide goes forward. So you don't even want to do that, okay? Hard thing for people to learn. But then the last one up there is always keep your gun unloaded till you're ready to use. And does that apply to your carry firearm or your home firearm? No, that's in use. We're talking about the hunting gun that you went out and shot the elk with and you put it away. You want to put it away in a storage area where it's locked, so non-authorized people cannot get to it, separate from the ammo, which is also should be locked up, and of course the mechanism deactivated. That's the gun you're not going to be using, but your carry guns and your home guns for defense have to be ready to rock and roll, and be fully loaded. And the safety factor there is, how are you going to keep it loaded in your home when there's kids, and you don't want the kids getting in there and things like that. Well, we discuss that in our classes and give you some pointers. But again, your environment, you've got to keep it safe when there's loaded guns. Okay, and lastly, if I were asked you handing a gun to someone, if you were asked to hand a gun to someone, what's the first thing you would do? Well, that's correct, but there's the first thing you got to do. Maintain safe muzzle direction first, then unload the gun, and then while you're handing it to the guy or gal, keep it pointed in a safe direction. That's the first rule, always, that muzzle. And the last one I'll leave you with is number 4. All guns are always loaded, correct? And treat them as such. Any questions on safety? There's more things that we cover in the class. Good. Okay. Now you see the term marksmanship out there, and it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but I'll hone down on it. First, we have the position. That has to be taught. Like for pistol, there's 4 that we teach and a 5th. In the hold area, it's rifle and grip, we call it handgun. Breath control is practiced in long-range shooting, etc., but not in self-defense. You don't have time. Sight alignment, picture, very important. Trigger control, most important, and follow-through reset is very important. Okay, so these are the things, the 6 fundamentals of shooting rifles and handguns. As you'll see up there, shotgun is a specialty. Now, we teach clay shooting. We teach people to become clay shooting instructors, shotgun instructors. We do that. And it's an entirely different art. And it's a true art with point shooting. Everything has to be just right, and you have to do lots of practice before you can hit those clays regularly. I love it. I haven't done it much in the past few years. I really started into it in Florida, in Tampa, years ago. General R. Schwarzkopf, with the judge and a couple other people there in Tampa, set up a 300-acre facility for shotguns. And that's how I got to know and shoot with the general. He was really a great guy. He shot the bull with us. He's just a regular guy in those days. But that's where I cut my teeth on all this shotgun stuff. But it's a specialty beyond the others. And it's the first skill lost if you don't use it. Okay, so you see the basic mechanisms. Go ahead. Now, in the shooting sports, you have all these things and activities that go on. The long-range shooting, shotgun, clay shooting, competitive shooting sports, SAS, IDPA, youth NRA competition shooting, and other things. The gun training there comes into the fact that first you have to know the fundamentals of marksmanship and the other 6 things I had up there. For rifle, pistols, a lot more for shotgun, but you got to really get those mastered down. Then you go out and do these sports. And in the sports themselves, there is training. Okay, now very popular up there is the IDPA. I put the SAS up there because that's my favorite. IDPA is too. IPSC, and I've shot them all. I was a very heavy competitive shooter for about 15 years here in this area. The SAS, Single Action Shooting Society's game of cowboy shooting is my game, okay? I love it. The town up in Rexburg, I was one of the major builders with the founder, Dion Davenport, and we had a great time for many years up there. Now it's pretty much gone down. They have a few members left, but vandals have come in and sprayed graffiti, broke all the windows in the buildings. That kind of stuff. So it's kind of going down. But anyway, I'm proud to say that we like Single Action Shooting Society shooting. It's really great. And all that other stuff up there is great. I mean, any one of those things, though, I do require some specialty training. Okay. Is anybody here involved with shooting sports at all? Okay. All right, good. Next. Hunting. Hunting is a specialty unto itself. I was a hunter ed educator for about 7 years here. I was on the board as secretary for 7 years. They're all my friends. They've given me grants for my, there I go again, given grants for our range, and they come out and shoot. We're a non-for-profit organization. We led the Sheriff's Department, 4-H, and the Boy Scouts and the Fish and Game use the range at no charge. That's how we had to have something for them. There's nothing for them in the whole area except our range. Okay, so firearms safety, Idaho hunting laws, firearms marksmanship, habitat understanding, survival skills, application of field hunting methods, terrain orientation, compass, etc., and your GPT, whatever, and understanding the weather. And that's just most of what you have to know, but there's even a lot more for the survival, first aid, etc. You have to know a lot. They've taken the shooting out of hunter ed. There's no more shooting required. I'm not for that. They figure they have mentors and fathers can teach them, but I really, in my time, I kept doing it. They had stopped it, and I said, no, I'm continuing to do it. So we had a nice air range there at the center of the circle there, Circle Street, where I taught, and I required my students to still shoot the air guns. Anyway, years before, we had 22s, and we got together in one of the major ranges, and we'd have a great day with all the kids, maybe 50 or 60 of them at a clip, and that was really the best, but they don't do that anymore. Okay, go ahead. Now, self-defense training is entirely different. It goes beyond anything you can imagine. You obviously learn the fundamentals. You learn to maintain recall management control. We cover all that in every one of our self-defense classes first, and you'll become good at that fast. But I think the rest of it gets more intricate. Situational awareness, marksmanship, tactics, mindset, responsibility, and there's a lot more, okay? We teach only self-defense. We do not fool around with crazy targets and get them all on one target and quit, and that's the end of it. We teach you everything. And Randy can attest to that, the way we do it. Our manual that you get, we give a training manual with every one of our training classes, and the manual for our concealed weapons class is 64 pages long. And there's been some in this clip here that I've taken, and I can tell you. But anyway, that's the complexity of self-defense training. We now have in this state, because we're a Second Amendment sanctuary, we recommend the Second Amendment be carried out. You can carry now without a license. A carry permit is no longer necessary. You can carry concealed with a license. The hang up in the law was they did not allow you to carry loaded in the car with your gun, and they changed that now, and you can carry concealed in your car as well. So I would say this, and I know Randy would agree, that if you want to do that, you go right ahead. But if you've not been training the subtleties of self-defense and what's required, then you are going to be in serious trouble if you're attacked, okay? So keep in mind one thing. When they attack you, they want your gun. They'll take your gun first if you let them, and if you don't know how to stop them, they will. And then they'll use that gun to kill you, and then they will sell that gun, rent it, or use it for further crimes. That gun is a target, okay? They want it. So you want to keep those things in mind. So if you wish to carry that way and you feel fine, just be careful. I remember one time I was over at Walmart and I was walking behind a man who was big and had quite a center on him, and a little semi-auto, some kind of little holster, no retention or anything, just back here. I could have walked up and taken that gun from him and shot him right there. He had no way to protect himself. And obviously him being out like that, he does not know what he's doing. You just don't want to do things like that. I'm just telling this for your own safety. Okay, any questions on that? Now we have the self-defense diamond. I put that up there so you can see. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I'm not saying that. See, this man was a target because his gun was right out here in the open, back here. He's carrying open. If it's concealed carry, yeah, they don't see it. That's why you want to do concealed carry. You don't want them to see you're armed. Okay, yeah, good question. Anything else? Now, I had the self-defense diamond up there just to show you the integration of the four main things, of which there's many subheadings. And what we have up there is mental attitude, very, very important. If you cannot take a life, don't carry a gun. We only teach you to shoot and stop the threat. Shoot and stop the threat. Not to kill the person. They may die because they got shot. But we're just telling you to shoot to stop the threat. But if you have any hesitancy for your religion or whatever else you have, don't ever carry a gun. Because what's going to happen is you're not going to use it. They will attack you and take it, just like I said. Okay, so I'm not going to get into all the intricacies on gun battles, and all we do that in the class. Marksmanship is the fundamentals of shooting. Tactics are so important. We have lots of those to teach. And, of course, responsibility. You're carrying a thing, if you like, that can kill people, okay? It can kill you, okay? It's very dangerous. But once you learn to handle it correctly, shoot it well, learn the safety, and learn the different techniques for self-defense right up front, then you'll be in better shape. God forbid any of you are ever attacked. There's a very famous school which two of my brethren went to and trained, actually taught there back in Virginia. The one was a CIA agent. He was my mentor. He also trained at Quantico. He taught me a lot of stuff before he passed. And they did a review one time over so many years of their graduating students. It was about 25,000 of them over like a 10-year period. And 2 were killed in gunfights. The other ones that were in gunfights survived. They were very proud of that record. Question came up about those 2. What is that all about? They weren't carrying at that time. They didn't have a gun on them. So that's a good salute to that school. It's a great school. Okay? Go ahead. In conclusion, remember, the Second Amendment prevents the government from taking your gun. It does not give you the right that comes from God. Number 2, firearm training is essential to safety and teaching you to shoot well. Next. Any questions? The thing in California is, and how I know a lot of people from California, okay, because some of them are my business that work with me. We also have people in our classes training all the time, but also I've had friends out in California. My wife and I used to like to visit California, and we had some friends out there because we liked it. It was very nice. We were talking many years ago. No, I wouldn't go there now. And was that Gascon that did that? I think it was. Well, Bourdain is gone. They got him out on a recall. You have no recourse. He did a wrong thing there. I'm aware of what he did, okay? But then again, that's why he's being recalled. And the judge told him, the federal appeals judge, gave him a warning the other day and said to Gascon, you will enforce the law, 3 strikes, and you are out. That is the law. And you are not a lawmaker. You're hired to and voted in to enforce the law, and you're not doing it. 3 strikes and you're out. I want to see it now, because he won't do it. I go back to Philadelphia in the bad times. It's always been bad, even 50, 60 years ago when I was there. But I had a lot of family members that were cops. My neighbor was a captain in the police force on Green Street, number 2 under Rizzo. They were brutal in their crime control. But they had to be. We had a situation in the subways where we ended up with 3 or 4 people a night being killed at the various subway stations. So he set the law down on them, and he set down 2 cops, a dog, and shotguns at each station. That crime ended. Well, a few guys tried a few things, and they were shot and killed. He did not fool around. With this situation now, it's out of hand, totally. It won't happen here, but it is in California, Washington, and Oregon, and all the blue states. Yeah, they have. They will tell you, these people that ignore the Supreme Court, that they didn't vote for those justices. They were put into place by an illegal president who never won and we would never support. So therefore, we're going to ignore it, okay? Well, suppose our side, when they get their liberal court back and we can't live with what they're doing, and we're going to say, well, we're going to ignore it. What would they do? Well, right now we see the January 6th situation, don't we? And where's everybody? 450 people are still in the slammer, not even charged. And the ones that are coming out are getting long sentences. They're giving them hell, okay? But I remember back in 2020, number of cities being burned down, $2 billion worth of damage, cop cars blown up, people killed. It's okay. They let them go. So I'll answer that with what he's saying. This is what we have. They ignore the Supreme Court. And one last thing in New York, Haschel came out and she said, well, we have to abide by the Supreme Court's ruling that we have to go from may issue to shall issue, but this is what's required, okay? They didn't give the fees, but there'll be high fees for the permit. It'll take a couple of months to get it, to get the application through that you can then, get your gun, and that's another story. But then they have all these other roadblocks, training classes, all these extra things. They're making it very difficult and arduous for you to obtain that permit, period. And that's what they're going to do. They don't want you to have a gun. So. I'll refer that to Rick. He's a dealer now. I was a dealer years ago when that did apply. Is it, yes, Dave? You appeal directly to them yourself, not the dealer. The ATF is tight buttoned. You can't do much with them. Another question? No. You have to send them in. Right. But the law says, the old laws, and they don't abide by them anymore. They could keep them, I think, up to 3 months, and then they had to destroy them. But what was the last ark? With when he took the chalice and they moved it into the warehouse there. Well, what happens to those 4473 is probably similar. They could care less. The whole purpose of the 4473 is to prevent criminals from buying guns. Now, we see an issue here, which is interesting to me, the one we just heard. The guy had a carry permit, he forgot, and he filled out the 4473, he was denied, and he wanted to come back with his carry permit to get his gun. Guy to the right thing. No, you can't, okay? Well, is he kicking himself for not using the carry license instead of submitting himself to the NICS? So that tells me he just suspected that anything was wrong. So now he's sitting up there thinking, what did I do wrong that they won't let me have a gun? Because he doesn't have a gun right now. And if he went to someplace else and formed out another 4473, probably the same thing might happen. So why is he being targeted? Well, if that was me, I'm going to find out. I don't care if I have to go over to the office and over here in Pocatello or wherever the hell our office is here. I'm marching right into the FBI. Hey, here's my name, here's my number, and this. I want to know what's going on. Okay, yeah, yeah. That never went in. Right. So that's not the issue. Right. Well, if you when you go in here, if you go in the store and you fill out the 4473 and they call it in, I don't know what the turnaround is now. It used to be like a few days. It's electronic, so it's not automatic. Yeah, but the paper days, it was pretty fast too. Oh yeah, okay. Our concealed weapons class is $95. It's an 8-hour day. Okay, 3 hours on the range. Rest is classroom work. And we also have a 64-page training manual that comes with that because you will learn from us that self-defense is not as easy as it seems, but we're going to make it easy for you. And we're going to teach you all the tricks of the trade that could save your life quickly. And that manual contains a lot of dry practice using dummy cartridges because in the end, self-defense is a motor skill only. You have no time to think. I always say to my students to give the correlation. I was an airplane and helicopter pilot. In fact, I was a commercial helicopter pilot for years. And I used to use this idea. I'd say, look, normally you fly like 500 feet in the air in a helicopter. And unless you get into the city, sometimes you have to go 1,000. You're flying at 500 feet and the engine quits. You got 20 seconds to auto rotate to get to the ground. Otherwise, you'll die. 20 seconds. So do you think I have time to think, well, do I pull the collective up? Do I push the stick forward, pick it back? What do I do with the pedals? No. It's an automatic physical response immediately. Twin engine airplane. The engine goes out. You have about 3 seconds or 4 seconds to keep that plane flying straight by doing everything right. If you have to think about it, you're going to turn, go into a spin, and you're going. Okay, so that's how fast you have to react. It's not pleasant. But we teach you all that, and you become very proficient quickly because we're really professional educators. We do it right. Yeah, you get the book, you get the certificates and the applications and all that. It's a good price, really. Oh no, we don't give you a gun and ammo. You got to bring that. Now we can rent you that stuff, but that's more money. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, you have to go down to the station down there at the annex. Yeah, and they'll fingerprint you, and they'll take all the information you have from us, and then they'll process it. I don't know what the wait period is now. I heard 6 weeks. I don't know, but it's $65, and it's good for 5 years, and you can renew the next 5 years, and it's probably going to be the same price, and there's no further training required. Just on one time. $15 for renewal. Yes. Yes, you can carry without the permit, but keep a couple things in mind, and I'll give you a couple personal experiences. If you've had no training and you've made a mistake, you're in for hell. Okay? The main thing about this training is two things. One, tactics, which we teach you to defend yourself quickly, and the law. The law. I require prosecutors to teach the law. They know the law the best. They know what's going to get you in trouble the best, and can reveal that to you. So you want to keep that in mind. Is it worth the $95 to get the training? Because I guarantee you right now, unless you've trained elsewhere, if you're attacked, you're going to die. Okay, it is unbelievable, and I won't discuss all that here, but I do in the class. It's in the book, and I cover it very heavily. You have to understand it's a dire responsibility. Yes, Dave. Nothing's equivalent to the gun, but they will tell you mace, pepper spray. That's okay. I mean, I tell people when they drive in their car, when they carry a gun and they're legally to do so or not legally to do so, but they have the right to do it now and it's loaded. Don't put it in your holster. You got to put it somewhere in the car where you can get at it. Okay, because you'll be fumbling around. Car attacks come within a few seconds. They're at the window and they kill you. I have a friend of mine in Detroit. But I mean, it was 2 seconds they're on the window shooting at him. He had to kill the one guy and the other guy ran away. But luckily, he had a gun. It was Detroit, 50, 60 years ago. But yeah, that's correct. The weapons you could carry would be those sprays. You can carry a knife if you didn't care to entangle with the person. That's a good weapon. Some states don't even allow you to carry a knife without a permit. California is one of them. But you can carry a knife and anything else you want. You want to carry a billy stick? Fine. But remember one thing, and it's important. When you're attacked, don't let them get too close. Okay? With those weapons, you have to be close. And you don't know what happens when you get real close, what they're going to do. 18. Yeah. They have at 18. You can take it at 17 as long as you're going to be 18 within that year because the permit, the certificate for the permit that we give you is good for 1 year. They have a partial carry law that I think he can tell you more about it that allows 18-year-olds to carry, okay, concealed, but there's restrictions on it. Do you remember what they are? I don't know. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you get the basic permit, then it converts. No, that's right. That's up to the person. Yeah. The thing is that I've had two cases come up. One was a brandishing case. We had a gal in this is a number of years ago, about 6 years ago. We had a gal in one of our classes, and she took a lot of courses with us. And she did well, So I got a call from the sheriff's deputy over there. You have to come to trial for her. You got to tell us how she was trained because she's been brought up on a brandishing charge. So I said, yeah, well, just let me know. Well, he called me back and the charges were dropped. Then we had a situation. We had a murder case, suicide murder. We weren't sure here in Idaho. Was that a year ago or something? That case was up. I forget. The guy shot his cousin. Yeah, he said we taught him. Well, I went. They called me down. The detective called me down. Wanted me to bring the stuff that we do for teaching, see what they were taught. So I sat down with the guy and I went over everything. And I said, "What's this about?" Well, we have such and such case, which I knew about in the paper. He shot and killed his cousin in an argument. So he said he was trained by you guys. So I said, well, now that I have the name, I'll scope it out for you because we may have. I don't remember names. So we keep meticulous post records just in case for this. We went through our records up to the time all through the time and back to when he said he had the class. He did not take our class. So, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, yeah. That's one of the first things Randy teaches. Good point. Yeah, I saw. Yeah. No. He's in a pickle. Now, any other questions? Good evening. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was somewhat informative. Thank you. Appreciate it. My cards are back on the table if you're interested to find out more about us. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you very, very much. Let's give him another big hand. I have a couple of more things that I want to run through before we all leave. So again, Lou, thank you very much. It's like I say, the Second Amendment is very important to us, but you have to be able to understand and know what you're using. So a little bit of a side topic. I actually ran into that TikTok video. Something that I ran into just while I was sitting here, and I thought I would share it with folks. And a little bit of good news. Listen to this. See if it works.
You know what?
You're finished.
You can count on being sued.
It seems to me that you think you can supersede the United States Constitution. I've got news for you, School Board President Benito Mussolini. Your power does not supersede that of the U.S. Constitution and the First Amendment rights of the citizens of this great nation. Let's be very, very clear who has the power.
Mr.
It is
Campbell,
not government policy. Do not warn me or do not interrupt my time. This is my comment, not your comment. I'm quoting to you now from the United States Supreme Court 1964 case, New York Times versus Sullivan. This is constitutional case law in this country. This nation is founded on the, quote, profound national commitment to the principle that debate on public issues shall be uninhibited, robust, and wide open, and that it may well include vehement, caustic, and sometimes unpleasantly sharp attacks on government and public officials. That's constitutional case law in this nation. I don't have to be nice to you. Nobody behind me has to be nice to you. If you don't like living in the United States of America, then you can all move to Russia, Cuba, or China. This is the First Amendment. My right to critique your fascism, which is what this is constitutionally protected. We've got the school board president saying she'll do better at hitting the mute button in blatant violation of the Constitution for her lobbying and her advocacy of unconstitutional censorship. I want you, the school board, to terminate the employment of Dr. Charissa Gibson with immediate effect. And after you've terminated her employment, I want all of you to tender your resignations for hating on this country. We have a God-given constitutional right to critique you, and we can speak in any lawful tone.
That's somebody standing up and knowing what they're talking about, and that's what we all really need to do and listen to. And I'll try to find out exactly where that case law is and maybe get Dennis to help me and whatnot. But that is something we need to start learning to do and start standing up and saying enough's enough, especially to these things. I have one other quick video. Everybody knows who Paul Harvey is, right? This is something I found, again, the other day, and it's only about 3 minutes, but I'd like to have you listen to that. So if you need to, we'll see if we can hear it.
If I were the devil, if I were the devil, if I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness, and I'd have a third of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree, thee. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what'll you bet? I couldn't get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing. Paul Harvey. Good day.
Welcome back to the Megyn Kelly Show. We are so happy to welcome back to the program.
Oh, Megan wasn't who I had planned on, but that was 1965. Sounds a lot like today. To me, it did.
That we see fit.
I think the key there is if I were the devil. Well, the answer to that is we need to bring God back into our society. And we need to really focus on that and bring spirituality back. And, that's in my mind, what it's about. And so I'd like to leave you with that tonight. We all need to figure out how to, this was in 65, how do we bring God back into our lives, into our families, because that's what's going to be really critical for us to be able to turn this around. And with that, thank you all. We'll see you, some of you tomorrow night, the rest of you next week. Thank you for coming.